In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Christ is risen.
Truly he is risen.
So, beloved, a great evil has happened in Africa. A metropolitan of Zimbabwe has taken a woman and ordained her a deacon. He has actually made her a deaconess, but not in accordance with the early church. And she is serving litanies in the church and communing the faithful as a deacon. This is a great scandal upon the church, a blasphemy, for nothing like this has ever been done in the history of the Holy Church, ever. Yet, there are many deaconesses of the history of our church. And because today we celebrate Fotini, this tremendous woman at the well, who is very holy, I want to speak about deaconesses as they truly were in the old times, not as this bishop has erred. And bishops have risen up and condemned his action and have spoken harshly to him. The Patriarch of Alexandria has, I think, distanced himself from this action. The Patriarch of Alexandria has made a number of women deaconesses, but he has done so in the old way, in the ancient way. In the ancient church, there was an office of the deaconess. This office was rare. To be honest with you, it wasn't a Catholic practice. What I mean by this is that it wasn't universal. Not every church had deaconesses. Many churches never did. The Church of Rome, if it did have deaconesses, they were very short-lived, and they removed them quickly. Deaconesses existed in the East. In fact, to be honest with you, we have 2,000 manuscripts of services that come down from the Byzantine history. 2,000 of these manuscripts. And they contain in them the services for making priests and making readers and making bishops. And of these 2,000 documents, only 12 contain the service for making a deaconess. Which means that the service was done very, very rarely. And it wasn't thought to be necessary. So most bishops didn't keep this book with them because they didn't do it very often. What was the service of making a deaconess like? There was some debate about what exactly it was like, but if we read the service, it's very different than the service of making a deacon. Because when a man is made a deacon, he kneels in front of the altar, and the bishop puts his hand on his head and he says, "You have a calling from God. And the calling of Christ is now going to be fulfilled in you." I'm paraphrasing this. The same is true of the priest. In the manuscript for making a deaconess, there is no calling at all. No mention of calling. What the service says, it says, this woman has come to offer herself for the service of God. And of course, there's more to this prayer. She does not kneel at all. The bishop says a prayer over her, which is why many think that this prayer happened at the throne. Like when you see a reader being made. The woman would have approached the throne, the bishop would have said his prayer, and what exactly does the prayer say? What is she supposed to do? When a man is made a deacon, or a man is made a priest, all his words speak to the altar, speak to the Eucharist, speak to the mysteries. The priest offers sacrifice, the deacon assists in offering sacrifices. But for the deaconess, it says nothing of this at all. It doesn't say anything about her role in offering mysteries, because she can't. And so what it says in the Byzantine prayer book is it says that she is to take care of God's house. And so what we don't really know is how often was this done in churches versus monasteries. In a monastery, there is only one man in the monastery for women. That's the priest, who's married priest, and he's serving the services for the women. What this means is that there are things in the altar that may need to be helped with, as in the floor may be swept, certain things must be done, hot water might need to be brought in, and the priest cannot do all these things because he is a busy man. And so it's very possible that deaconesses were nuns who received a blessing from the bishop to enter the altar, to sweep it, to hand the priest hot water, not to touch the altar, but to do certain things within it. St. Nectarius made a deaconess in his own monastery on Aegina, probably for this reason. St. Nectarius was so strict, he would not let men come into that monastery. Men were not allowed to go to this monastery when he was there. And he was an old man with advanced prostate cancer. So he needed help to do certain things. And so probably he anointed a woman to be a deaconess so that she would do some things in the altar for him, hand him certain things, sweep the floor, do certain things that were important. But not do litanies. St. Nectarius would do the litanies. So what did deaconesses do? They took care of God's house. They cleaned the temple. They made candles for the church, actually. Deaconesses made all the candles. Deaconesses would make food for the trapezoid service. Deaconesses would perform a very special function. They would do social visits for women. This was something that they did. Deaconesses would also help with baptisms, because all baptisms in the ancient times were done in the nude completely. For example, when you see a baby being baptized, the priest takes oil and anoints the baby. In the Greek church, they anoint the baby entirely, completely. Now think there's an adult woman who is completely nude, and the priest has to anoint her body with oil. Not a good idea. The deaconess does this. The priest probably still does the baptism, but he touches the woman's head and baptizes her 3 times. So he doesn't touch anything that shouldn't be touched. But the deaconess does everything else. So this was very important, because most baptisms in the early church were adults, and all were nude. This is how they were done. Because when you're baptized, you're being born from above. And when a baby is born, they don't come out clothed. So therefore, you are being literally born anew. Today, because of modesty, we baptize people with their clothes still on. But in the early church, that was not so. And so deaconesses did this task quite well. They helped a lot in this situation. Deaconesses were celibate. They were celibate. They weren't allowed to be married. And in fact, their age had to be high. They had to be older. In fact, there kept being prescriptions from the church saying, do not make a deaconess until she's 40. No, not until 50. And then, around the year 700, or in the 700s, the Patriarch of Constantinople said, no more deaconesses. No more. I don't want any more. And they said, okay, we'll not have any more. And by that point, the West had no deaconesses, and probably had not had them for hundreds of years. And the East got rid of deaconesses and did not keep them at all. Why? It's hard to say. Most of the functions that they fulfilled did not need to be fulfilled anymore. And there may have been some scandals involved. I don't know. Because they kept saying that they need to be older. Maybe because there was young deaconesses who made errors, and they brought upon themselves disgrace. So they said, no, only someone who's 50 should be a deaconess. Only a woman of great magnitude should be a deaconess. So in the early church, men and women didn't stand together in church at all. The women would be on one side of the church, men would be on the other. Or if the church was big, there would be a gallery up high up, looking down. And all the women would be up there, and the men would be below. And so deacons would be sent from the church, from the altar, to watch over the men, to make sure they were behaving. Subdeacons, if there was no deaconess, and most people didn't have deaconesses, would be sent up into the galleries to make sure the women were behaving. But if there was deaconesses, they would go up and make sure that the women were behaving properly. If we had a deaconess today, what would she look like in this church? She would probably be a nun. She would probably be a consecrated nun. She would probably wear a cassock, a black nun's cassock. Maybe she'd wear an aurora around her shoulders. I don't know. That'd be up to the bishop. And what would she do? She would stand with the women, and she would be an example to them of all piety and righteousness. She would live on church property, probably. She would clean the church. She would make food. She would visit the sick. She would take care of women who were in need. She would be a model of righteousness to all. Would she enter the altar? No. There would be no reason for her to. Would she touch the mysteries? Never. There would be no reason for her to. Would she make sick visits with the mysteries? No, I would do this. If we had a second chalice, would she administer it? No, the deacon would, if we had a second chalice. So the problem arises then is that in the modern church, all the things deaconesses do are already being fulfilled. There's many women now who clean the church. Women now beautify the church all the time. They bring flowers in and they beautify the church. Women sing in the choir. If there was a woman who wanted to make candles, I'd say, may it be blessed. In the church I came from, there was a woman who dipped her own beeswax candles for the altar. If a woman is sick, people from this church go to visit this person. There are women now visiting people in the hospital. Whenever a birth happens, there's a line of women bringing meals to them. All the work of the deaconesses of the old times is now being performed now in the church. And it's still being done, never ended. All those tasks are still being done. They're actually being done now by the women of this parish who do these tasks all the time. And they don't do them for glory, and they don't do them so they can wear some kind of vestment. They do them because they have love. And God praises them greatly for the things that they do. So over time, this office ended. When the Patriarch of Alexandria made deaconesses, he said a prayer from his throne, probably following the service of the Old Book, and he simply said to these women, being that we live in Africa, and widows need to be attended to, I'm blessing you to go and visit widows, and to help them, to catechize them, to say prayers with them, because men cannot go into the homes of widows without causing scandal in Africa. A priest cannot go into the house of a woman in Africa without causing scandal. So therefore, I'm blessing these deaconesses to go and to minister, to do these things. Is this legitimate? It very well could be. It could be. A ministry like this could be revived, and it could be necessary. But the Metropolitan of Zimbabwe, choosing to take a woman and make her into a deacon, this has never been done, and this is a heresy, a blasphemy. It's wrong. Why is this so wrong? If we go back through the entire scriptures from the beginning to the end, there was never a time in which we see that God calls upon women to make offerings at the altar. Women make a lot of offerings. Hannah, the mother of Samuel, offers her own son to God. Right? Hannah can't have a child. So she prays and she says, "Oh God, give me a son. I want a son." With her husband Elkanah. She has a son. She names him Samuel. And she brings him to the temple, to the tabernacle, to Eli, and she says, "God has given me the fruit of the womb. I'm giving him back to God." So she made an offering. This is not an offering of the altar. This is an offering of her own. Could women bring sacrifices to the tabernacle? Yes, they would. And the priest would offer them. So in the Old Testament, there was never a concept that offerings would be made from the altar by a woman. They were made by, first we hear actually of Abel and Cain. Obviously Adam made offerings. We hear Noah making offerings, all the way up to Moses and Aaron, all the way through the priests, all the way to the time of Christ. We never see this. Why is this? Why is this? Why doesn't God ever say, "I want women to offer upon the altar"? He never says this ever. Not in the Old Testament, not in the New. Why? Because there is one man who is the true high priest, Jesus Christ. He is the true high priest. And every single priest from the beginning until Jesus Christ was an image of him. Every single one. Adam and Eve. In fact, here's one of the things you need to understand. Christ is the image of God, truly. We are images of the image. Jesus Christ is the image of the Father. The image. We participate in the image of God. That is true. We are images of the image. So, for example, when you have Adam who is created, what happens? A suitable helper is needed. I preached on this at the wedding. Woman is drawn from the side of Adam. This is a foreshadowing of the church being pierced and drawn from the side of Christ. Christ doesn't copy Adam. God copies no one. What Adam did, when God drew Eve from Adam's side, this was a foreshadowing of what he would do with the church, when he would draw the church out of the side of Christ, when blood and water would pour out of Christ's side, and that would be the church. The church would flow from this. So Christ isn't copying anyone. Adam is actually foreshadowing what will come. Adam is foreshadowing all. And so St. Paul makes these interesting comments. St. Paul says, and I'll need to unpack this for you. St. Paul says that man is created for God, and woman was created for man. Let me explain this. Adam is created from the dust, directly. Eve is created from Adam, by God. Not by Adam, by God. But in a sense, Eve owes her life, in a sense, to Adam, because she's drawn from him. She's drawn out of Adam. She comes out of him. What is the significance of this? The significance is that the church is drawn directly from Christ itself. The church comes directly from Christ. Christ gives birth to the church. He nourishes the church. So man and woman in themselves represent Christ and the church. They literally do, even in biology. The woman is the receiving party. The man is the active party. Life comes from this. Christ brings salvation. The church receives it. In the church, all are equal. Why? Because God gives every single person the same commandments. He gives to man the commandment to love God with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his mind, with all his strength, and to love his neighbor as himself. He says the same to the woman. No change. Man and woman are equal in the image of God. Why? If one was less in the image of God, Christ would have to do something extra to save the other sex. This is not so. Both sexes are sanctified. Why? Because both form humanity, and Christ is the fullness of mankind. So both participate in the image completely. Where is there inequality? In vocation. In vocation. So when God gives a vocation, he says, this is the work you will carry out. Is there equality among men in vocation? No. One man is called to be a king, the other is a peasant. Are they equal in God's love? Absolutely. Are they equal in commandments? Absolutely. Are they equal in the image? Absolutely. Are they equal in duty? No. The king is given one command, the peasant is given another. Does God love the king more? He does not. Does he love the peasant less? He does not. But not all men are kings and not all are peasants. The same is true in the church. Some are called to be apostles, some bishops, some priests, some deacons, some laity. There are differences in vocation. And the work of man is to fulfill the vocation God gives to him. This is the greatest thing a man can do. Because if we do not fulfill the vocations that are given to us, which are sacred and holy, the world completely collapses. If men do not fulfill their vocation with regard to society, society is chaotic and goes insane. Nothing works. There's no authority. Everything falls apart. There are single mothers. There's chaos. Children are not helped anymore. If women don't fulfill their vocation, then life ends. We don't have another generation anymore. The same is true of the church. The authority of God has to be manifest in the world. But the obedience of the church also has to be manifested. If it's not, then what do we have? We have many, many kings and no obedience. If we don't have a king, if we don't have authority, then we have a church without the Christ. This is also impossible. So both vocations are equal of necessity. We need both of them. Now, what does the scripture say of women, actually? It praises them a lot. There are 3 books named after women. We have Ruth, we have Esther, we have Judith. And in these 3 books, the virtues of Ruth are praised highly. She was loyal above all things. She was humble and loyal. And from Ruth comes the Christ. In the book of Esther, we have a woman who's made queen. And she is the only person who can actually save her entire nation. Because she's married to a Persian, a Gentile. And she saves everyone through her own courage and her own faith. In the book of Judith, what happens? The Assyrians invade Israel, and all the Jewish men are so cowardly they don't do anything. And Judith says, this is terrible. And God inspires her, so she assassinates the general of the Assyrians. Very intense quote. Judith is very resourceful, very intense, very brave. She does this very successfully. What about the Maccabees? They have their mother who watches as all 7 of her sons are skinned alive in front of her, are actually tortured to death in front of her. And the mother of these 7 sons is the one who made them that way. Why are the 7 sons so firm in their love of God? Because their mom is so firm in her love of God. And the mom stands there like a stone as her 7 sons are executed in front of her, one after the other. And the pagans say, do you not have pity upon your own womb? The mother says, no, I love God. I honor him. And she praises her 7 sons as each one of them is snuffed out by the pagans. As each one of them gives up his life and is executed, the mother glorifies her sons, praises them. They have accomplished great things. But who taught them to accomplish great things? Their mom did. When the New Testament arrives, what happens? God is born of the Virgin Mary, the greatest of all creations. There's no creation greater than the Mother of God. No angel is greater than her. The seraphim are not greater. The cherubim are not greater. She is the greatest of all created things that God has ever made. And she is a woman. When God calls his disciples, he calls and gives his authority to the 12 and the 70. But who else labors for him? Photini, the woman we just celebrated today at the well. Photini goes on to become a great preacher of grace. What happens? Just like she preaches in Sichar, she preaches in Rome too, and is executed there along with her sister and her sons. And actually the church calls Photini an equal to the apostles in her labor and her desire and her zeal. Was Photini a priest? She was not. Was the Theotokos a priest? Why was she not? Because that would have violated the typos. The Theotokos would have had to leave her vocation and take another one, and she would not do it. She was not called to it, and she did not take up a calling she did not have. So she remained where she was, in the exalted place God granted her. Same with Photini. The same is true, actually, of Mary Magdalene, who was equal to the apostles, but had no ordination. She was not called to this rank. And so, beloved, this bishop in Zimbabwe has erred greatly. For he has done something that even the prophets did not ask for. He has done something the apostles did not command. He has done something that God has not directed him to do. Something that is gravely errant, that offends all Christians, because it is a change to our faith. It's something different. It's something that has never come before. This bishop, though he does not mean to, is actually breaking the icon that God established. Like an icon that is so deep, it's written into man's biology. Even the way biology works, envisions the redemption of Christ. Go read Song of Songs. This book is entirely about God and the church, Christ and his church. Though it leaves a lot to the imagination. But that is what it's truly about. And so, beloved, God gives to each one of us a command. There was a monk praying on Mount Athos. He was asking God deeply. He prayed to God in a very intense way. He said, Lord, he said, I've been fasting many, many years. What do you command me to do? What do you want from us, men? What do you want from us? This monk was very good. And suddenly this monk heard an ineffable voice from heaven. A very bold voice. A powerful voice, but a voice so consumed with love and glory. The voice said to him, there are 2 things I ask of men. One is that they love me as their Father. The second is that they fear me as their Creator. They reverence me as their creator. They're in awe of me who made them. These are the two things I command. That you love me as your Father, and you fear me as your creator. In order for us to fear God as our creator, we must accept the vocations that he gives to us. We must accept the plan he's given to us. We must accept the order he has given to us, and we live in this order. And by living in it, what happens? Everything happens. Life flourishes. Joy is created. Families emerge. Society becomes stable. There's great blessing in this. To overturn God's creation, nothing good comes. The world today overturns everything. Every single thing that God has asked the world to do, men have overturned. And our society is the epitome of this. Are men happy today? No. Are women happy today? No. They're not happy because they don't want to fulfill their vocations. Now you see why the church is so strict about sexual sins, about homosexuality, about all these different things, because the church is desperate to keep this icon alive. The church wants this icon imprinted in society, the icon of man, the icon of woman, the icon of Christ, the icon of his church, and the relationship between the two, and the order between the two. The church wants it so bad to be maintained. Why? Because it must be. Otherwise, men lose everything. They don't know how to relate to God anymore. They don't know how to relate to each other anymore. The church is feminine. Why? Because it is a mother who teaches her son. Who teaches me? The church does. Who nourishes me? The church does. When a baby is at the breast of his mother, he's nourished by his mother. The church nourishes us. The church defends us, as mothers oftentimes defend their children. The church is never masculine, it's feminine. Because God is masculine. God is our Father. And yet God is beyond all created categories. So is God truly masculine? No, God is beyond the category of any created thing. But God reveals himself as masculine because he has built this order into creation. We should associate authority with one, we should associate the church with the other. That's why God has done this. And so pray for this bishop of Zimbabwe. Pray for him. Pray for the church, that she will maintain her teachings, that she will walk correctly, and will avoid these errors that are so perilous and so damaging. But beloved, go and fulfill your vocations. And fulfilling your vocation as man and your vocation as woman, you will please God above all things. Amen.